Alright guys, welcome back. Today we are finally breaking down the complete Season 1 tier list for Gekishin Squadra, closing things out on patch 1.2. And man, this last update did bring a lot of new things, but for the most part the game has been pretty stale. Toppo has finally dropped and having some massive buffs to the Gammas. The entire meta overall has not shaken up too much, but as we get closer to this finish line, definitely some changes to be made and definitely something to keep an eye out for next season. Characters rose, others fell, and some teams we thought were dead are suddenly back in place. So strap in because we're diving deep into what actually ended Season 1 at the top. Alrighty guys, we're going to go ahead and do what we usually do. If you guys are new here, what we do is we go ahead and put the entire list up off the bat since most people are going to skip to the end anyways. So with that being in mind, we're going to put the entire list up and we're just going to go ahead and go through each tier and talk about the characters and give our thoughts about why they are the way they are and where they are placed. If you guys want to go ahead and let me know your thoughts, make sure you put a comment down below and I will go ahead and respond to you. But with that being said, let's go ahead and dive straight into, we're going to go into the worst in the game tier. And this tier is essentially what I would say is the worst characters in each role. And not even anymore. Before I used to say like you could make most of these characters work. But as of right now, these characters are in such a bad spot that if you are playing them, you're basically handicapping yourself. Off the bat, like Bojack, he provides nothing in this current burst meta. In the current burst meta, Bojack has essentially zero presence. He has no really good secure. He does have some good DPS, but that DPS doesn't matter in a meta where you're getting one shot. He doesn't have the survivability for that, and he doesn't have the range for that. So if you're going to play a DPS character in this meta, you need one of the two. You need to either have the range or the survivability, which is what some of the other characters that we'll talk about later do have. But Bojack is a very immobile DPS who does just not provide enough of anything right now to be substantial in the meta. Now, Dabura and Toppo are both also in a very similar situation, and that is the situation where they're both melee characters in a very much so ranged meta and a very much so burst meta. The problem with that is as they are melee characters, it's much harder for them to dodge skill shots or dodge damaging things because they're in the front lines trying to do their damage. And then on top of that, they are both DPS characters. Dabura wants to get his Petrify off to try to get some damage over time, and same thing with Toppo. He wants to get his stacks up and he wants to keep resetting his cooldown with basic attacks. Both of them are not very burst heavy characters. Dabura can burst once he gets his Petrify off, and Toppo can burst once he has 4 stacks. Both of those situations are very unlikely because most of the time you will die before either of those will happen because right now the game just has a lot of damage. The other thing that comes in hand with them being melee characters is that it's harder for them to maintain snowball stacks because it's much easier for them to die because they have to go into the front line to get their damage. And those snowball stacks are just game changing right now. Snowball and barrier are the two most broken cards in the game in slot 1 and slot 2 respectively. And if you're not able to utilize them well, you're just not going to be able to be placed high in a tier list format where we're trying to determine who the best is. Now, Cell is probably the best character here that has a chance of escaping this tier without receiving like major changes, because the biggest issue with Cell is just the fact that he is incredibly hard to get a fast transformation with, but once he is transformed, he does some very good damage, he has some very good utility, some decent sustain. But the biggest issue with Cell right now is it takes too long for him to transform, and his sustain is interruptible, and that's the big thing, is that his sustain is interruptible. Every other tank in the game, you're not able to interrupt their sustain. Zamasu can get his minions for free, Vegeta can get his things for free, Cooler can get his iframes for free, and Khalifa can get a provoke for free. But then there's Cell, whose healing you can literally stop with like everything in the game. So that is a big thing that stops him from being able to really be effective. So some anti-interruption resistance would definitely help on that skill 3 if he can get that. And that alone would honestly be enough, because at least then you can get his guaranteed heal off. But he also does need a faster transformation. Android 17, I think, is definitely the character that has been left in the dust this season as the technical. Starting off in the season, he was decent. Like season 0 when he dropped, he was pretty decent. But the moment we got into season 1, Android 17 just kind of kept falling off harder and harder every single patch. And the reason for that was because every other technical character essentially got buffed. We had also release of Gotenks. That was another big one. Hit also just completely outclassed him. Gohan started off season 0 with massive buffs. Boo got a massive buff throughout the season. So that was one of the things. Frieza got a massive buff. But the biggest issue with Android 17 is the fact that the HP he gives from both his ultimate and his skill 3 falls off very quickly. So you don't really get a lot of value with it, even if you time it well. So I think the changes that would need to be made to Android 17 for him to be like back in the meta and valuable is make the HP that he gives last more and have it decay over time. If he had those two things and you could get actual value out of that HP, then he would see some actual play and be more effective. But as of right now, he just doesn't do enough. The only thing he's really good for is ratting towers, and that is still a pretty good skill, being able to rat towers very safely because of the movement speed he has. But it's just not enough compared to what other characters can do right now, both in a team fight setting and both in a ratting setting. With that being done, we are going to move on to the good tier here, which is going to be very short. But I will preface that I believe every character from good tier and above, if you play them well enough in the game, you can win the game. This is where I think, like, there's definitely a meta, right? That is the BIS slot. That is the best in slot. Those are the characters that will give you the best chance at winning. But I still would say any of these other characters, if you're playing them well enough, you can win with them. And to start off the conversation here is going to be Trunks and Android 18. Both very similar characters, both dive assassin-like playstyles. But the main difference that I think puts Trunks above 18 is definitely still much more of a single target focused DPS. Whereas Trunks is able to assassinate multiple targets if he's able to do enough AoE damage, or if his team is able to provide enough damage and he can get his resets. Or he can do his ultimate, which does a massive chunk of AoE damage. Both situations are much more favored to Trunks rather than Android 18, and that's why she is where she is. And Mr. Baby, very, very solid tank. You can use him very effectively if you know how to do the things with him. But he's very good at lane. His skill 1 is very strong in lane. His possession can give you sustain in lane. Both are very, very immaculate skills to have. His ultimate also giving him some extra HP. He does very solid damage. But the biggest thing with him is that he does not have a lot of pressure if you just target his teammate. He's not able to really peel. And since they nerfed his sustain back in Season 0, he doesn't have the lifesteal anymore to really provide to his ally for them to stay alive. It's still very good, but now it's no longer like impossible to burn through that. So that's something definitely to keep in mind. Frieza is definitely somebody that I thought I would be placing higher, but he ended up being pretty low here. And the reason for that is just simply because Frieza, as good as he is still, he does struggle a lot because of his HP pool. He still has a very, very small HP pool, making him very easy to burst. And especially in this range meta right now, a lot of the Frieza things that he puts down, Zarbon and Dodoria, can get bursted by 3Q, they can get bursted by Daima, Super Saiyan 1, Kale, even Piccolo. And it's just very, very rough for him to really get value out of them. But the best thing that Frieza is good for in the current meta is just being able to take bosses. He's very good at taking bosses very quickly. And if you're not expecting it, then he will just get massive value out of that every single time. That will conclude our good tier. And now we're going to be moving on to the top tier, which is where the Gammas are now. They were massively lower before, but the Gammas have moved up into top tier alongside Piccolo, who got massive buffs at the start of the season. Oob, who I used to say was a BEIS, but now that we are in a much stronger lane phase, Oob not having a secure is holding him back in lane a lot, which is why I moved him down. But if he ever gets like a secure, or if we get just less burst damage in general in the meta, then I think Oob will be very back into that BIS tier because he is still a very, very good DPS. But all three of these characters here, very, very solid. Piccolo has some great burst potential. Oob has amazing DPS. Gammas have a little bit of both. Another big thing with Gamma is like you can use Core Breaker to like secure bosses pretty much guaranteed, and if the enemy team tries to contest, they basically lose because then they'll all be wiped by that Core Breaker because Core Breaker does a massive chunk of damage. It's a very free way to go ahead and land your Core Breaker and get value out of it, so that's something that you can do with them. And now the biggest thing with the buffs that they got is, one, their damage is a lot faster, so their burst is very, very strong, which is, again, we're in a burst meta, so that's a good thing for them to have, which is why Piccolo is also where he is instead of where Oob is, because Piccolo is both a burst and a DPS character. But the other big thing with Gammas is that the buff that they got gave them a much better HP pool to have control over. Their HP pool is a lot stronger now, and they're able to get a lot more value out of it because of the way it's split up and also the extra HP they get from their skills. Moving on to the tanks here, and again, I did forget to mention this previously, but we do organize this by role and then best in role in that order. So like I would say Gammas are the best DPS out of those three, but then they don't make up to the next tier. So it is organized by that way as well. But it's not to say that Gammas are better than Vegeta or Gammas are better than Zamasu. I'm not going to compare characters across different roles because that's just pointless. They're never going to be competing with each other. They're, in a general sense, just competing, like, how good is this tank in the current meta with the best characters? And that's why Zamasu and Vegeta are where they are, which we'll talk about once we get to the best in slots here. But Zamasu, he did also get a recent buff. His passive now lasts 5 seconds longer. It's more of a quality of life thing there rather than something that, like, really buffed him. But the main thing that built Zamasu over Vegeta for me is that Zamasu just has a lot more consistent sustain in lane because of that passive. and his bleed damage and his slowing, he just has a lot of different ways to be useful. Whereas Vegeta, it's very easy for him to get bullied out of lane by like just ranged characters. He can get bullied out by Riku, Daima, Super Saiyan, KO. Like there's a lot of characters that can bully him out of lane, and once he gets bullied out of lane, it's very hard for him to come back because then he falls behind on XP and he just doesn't have the means, unless you give them to him, to really sustain. But that's why I would say Zamasu is in a better spot than Vegeta right now, but Vegeta is also still a very, very strong character. Moving on to the techs here, I think the most questionable probably in this placement is going to be Krillin, because almost nobody knows how to play Krillin and nobody is playing Krillin right now. But Gotenks very freely is going to be the best tech outside of the top 2 techs that we get into. But Gotenks is still very good. His donut has a lot of value. His ghosts are very strong. His skill 1 very, very strong in lane as well. 1 vanish and he can basically guarantee a kill off of it. And then his ultimate also has a massive value, especially if you get it off and they're not expecting it. Then you get a no attack on them for a very, very long time. It allows you to turn fights very quickly, and it does do some decent damage. Majin Buu recently got buffed. His healing is a lot stronger now. It has to be actually respected. He also got much more personal HP, making him much harder to kill. And just overall, he just has a lot of value in the current state. I don't think either of those characters really need to be explained. They're both very self-explanatory, very good. But the thing with Krillin here is that Krillin is still one of the best characters to take towers with in the game. Gekishin High Krillin is still very, very strong. And then on top of that, Krillin's damage is nothing to be laughed at. If Krillin gets a solar flare into an ultimate, he will most likely like delete your team's health bar. That solar flare into ult is capable of one-shotting people, including DPSs and tanks. And it just does a lot of damage, and it's a massive amount of damage to be added to your team. Not to mention, if you get a blind off with his bombs, that can also be very beneficial, but that's the main thing that holds Krillin back from being higher tier, is that his bombs are very easy to kill in the current state of the game. But the thing is, he's not relying on those bombs. He has blinds both with his skill 3 and skill 2 as well. He makes it very hard for you to fight back because similar to Hit, he's constantly taking away your vision. The only difference being that unlike Hit, he's not doing it as easily as just I press ultimate and now you're blind for 4 seconds. That's the main difference that puts Hit where he is and Krillin where he is. With that, we will be getting into the best in slots here. And Riku currently, after the Goku nerfs that we have had, is now, I would say, the best DPS in the game, because no DPS in the game can compete with his map control. But having a 28-second to 25-second global instant transmission that you can use, essentially, is very, very strong. You're able to do a lot of things with that, both pressure-wise and defense-wise. It's just a very insane tool to give to a character just in their base kit, and they definitely need to adjust that going into Season 2, because he is setting a very bad precedence for new characters that are released. But that is the main issue with Riku right now. He's just very safe, and he is able to pressure the entire map. He can take over the game very, very easily. On that same note, we also have Damagoku, who is very, very good at farming. And now that he got his melee attack buff towards the beginning of Season 1, you actually have to respect his melee attacks as well. So that buff was completely unnecessary, by the way, but he did get it. And now his lane phase is that much stronger because now he has insane range on his melee attacks, and you have to actually respect them, making it very hard for you to escape, very hard for you to fight, because he's just essentially just getting constant chip damage on you. And he's also going to always out-secure you on farm because he has so much AoE damage. So you're put in a very lose-lose situation where you can't fight him and you can't farm against him. And he has a lot of defensive tools as well, both with skill 3 and just his natural HP bar, making it very hard for him to be contested. His ultimate's also very good for both securing and also doing damage in the team fight. Gives him an iframe for a little bit as well to try to dodge like big things. Like if somebody's trying to special beam cannon him, he can try to dodge that. But overall, he just has a lot of tools in his kit that give him that advantage. Super Saiyan Goku used to be the terrorizer of the game. He used to be very, very strong. But he did receive some nerfs, which nerfed his lane phase primarily. And that lane phase nerfs makes it much harder for him to compete right now, because everybody else has a very, very solid lane phase. Riku has a solid lane phase, Kale has a solid lane phase, and Damagoku has a solid lane phase. But if you are able to get out of the lane phase with Super Saiyan Goku, he's still able to do all the same things that he did before, and be able to constantly delete people and do a lot of damage with his Spear Bomb, AoE, all that good stuff. It's just now it's harder for him to get to that point because of how much weaker they have made his lane phase. Kale has not received any adjustments yet, but Kale is just naturally very hard countered by a lot of different things, because if you just use your ults on her, one of her skills, one of her big main skills, her ultimate, stops existing. However, she is still one of the highest burst damages in the game, and she can just completely take over a game just off of her burst damage and ultimate control alone. If you're able to snowball it, you're able to do basically the same thing as Riku, just on a smaller scale. So she is still very, very good. Moving on to the tanks, we've said this for a while, but Cooler and Khalifa are pretty much equal tanks. They both have very toxic mechanics, and you can try to make both of them work as you see fit. There's not much to really be explained by them. The other tanks just cannot compete with something as strong as provoke or pressure. Both of those effects are just insanely potent, making it very easy to both defend your team or lock down against the enemy team. Hitting Gohan having the massive buffs from season 0, making basically just like the perfect technical character, and Hit being the only one who can really rival him. And with Hit, the biggest issue with Hit is the perma invisibility, making him very hard to catch, as well as just his ability to pop an ult in a team fight and denying you the ability to steal bosses, to fight back, or even rotate, because you just don't know what's happening. That Hit ult takes so much information away from you that you don't really have a plan anymore, and you have to adapt very much on the fly, and a lot of teams are just not ready for that. But that is going to be our best in slots here. That is essentially how I feel about each character and why they are the way they are and where they are placed. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. With that being said, this is your boy Eisen. I'll see you in Season 2.